Explain the difference between shallow copy and deep copy.
Sure, let me first try to remember YouTube video I watched last week.
Hello everyone. So today we are going to cover a front-end interview question, and the question is related to the difference between shallow copy and deep copy of JSON objects. So let's try to understand the question first. The interviewer will ask you the question that explain the difference between shallow copy and deep copy. So this is related to how you make a copy of objects in JavaScript mainly. So let's try to first understand what is shallow copy. So shallow copy basically creates a new object, but it only creates the references or the copy of the first level values in the object and not the nested ones. What do I mean by that? Let's try to understand this with an example. So let's just say there is an object called as original with an ID 1, details like name, John Doe, location, New York. Then I create a shallow copy. How do I do that? I create a shallow copy using spread syntax. So I use the spread operator and I pass the original object into it. So the shallow copy will have all the variables or all the data from the original object. Now the thing that happens is, let's just say if I somehow change the details.location in my shallow copy, like if I set the location to Los Angeles, and if I log the original.details.location in my console, the output is Los Angeles as well. Why did that happen? Because shallow copy will only create a new copy of the first level objects and not the nested ones. If you go back to the definition again, now you understand it better. That is, a shallow copy creates a new object, but only create copies of the references of the nested objects, which means the location at which this details is stored or the reference of the details is shared by the shallow copy as well as the original copy, which is why when shallow copy.details.location was changed, the original.details.location was also changed. Let's try to understand this with actual code. So we have that same object here, which is original.id, details and some stuff, and we have a shallow copy. Now let's just say I do shallow copy dot id is equal to 2, which is I am first changing the first level object, and then I log the values using console dot log shallow, and within that I like print out shallow copy dot id, and I also console dot log the original dot id. So we have the original here and original dot id, and we log it to the console. Now if you see here, the shallow output is 2, which is expected, and original.id is also 1, which is expected because original has id 1, and shallow copy I created it from the original and I changed the id to 2, which is why the shallow copy.id is 2. If you are curious about the entire object, we can also like log that as well. So we go with shallow copy and the entire object, and let's wait for a while for the console to appear. And as you can see, the shallow copy now has the value of id 2 and rest of the details are same, right? Now what I do is, instead of just like updating the id, I update the location which is present where, which is present in the nested object, and here in the details.location I set the shallow copy's location to Los Angeles. Now I console.log the shallow copy.details.location, and now let's try to see what's the value. So as expected, it is Los Angeles, which is like okay. Let's clear the console once, and then I print out the original.details location, and now see what happens. Now if you print out the value to the console, as you can see, in both values the output is Los Angeles. That is, when I mutated the shallow copy.details location, which was Los Angeles, accidentally the original.details location also got updated. And why did that happen? That happened because the detail object, which is shared by original and shallow copy, so the reference to this object is shared by both because we have created a shallow copy using a spread operator. And that's the reason why when I mutate the copy of the object, the original object also gets changed. And that is one drawback of shallow copy, which is it creates the reference to the nested objects. That is, it is not a complete copy, but just a like copy of the original first level key value pairs, but the nested objects are just added to it using references. Now, how do we solve this? For solving this, what we do is we create something called as deep copies. Let's try to understand what is a deep copy. So deep copy creates a completely independent copy of an object, including all the nested objects or arrays. What I mean by that is, let's say I have again the original as my object and I create a deep copy. Now in order to create a deep copy, what we do is we stringify the original object and then we parse it again, completely removing the reference to the original object and creating a complete clone. Now in this case, if I set the deep copy.details location to Chicago, then the original.details location should remain unchanged and the deep copy.details location should be set to Chicago. Let's try to understand this with the actual code. So here I have again like wrote the same code. So we have the original object. Let's just like comment out the shallow copy completely. And here I have created a deep copy using json.parse, json.stringify original. And if we like console.log deep copy using the syntax, now as you can see, we have the object which is deep copy and it contains the ID1 details are initially set to location as New York. Now what do we do is we like set the location of deep copy to Chicago and then we like console.log the original.details. So here we set the original value and below that we set the deep copy value. So just like we did in shallow copy, we are setting the details.location to Chicago in the deep copy as well. Now as you can see, the original.details.location is set to New York and deep copy location is set to Chicago. Why that happened? Because deep copy created an independent nested object, which is why the original nested object of details remained unchanged and the original value of New York is now like maintained and it is not mutated because we have created a deep copy and deep copy.detail location is updated to Chicago from New York. So that was the like objective in mind, which is to like have a copy of the original object such that even the nested object should be independent of each other. If that is the use case for a particular code, then we create a deep copy using json.parse.json.stringify. And if we like just want a reference to the original nested objects and just a copy of the first level key value pairs, then we can create a shallow copy. So what is the difference between shallow copy and deep copy? Shallow copy creates a reference to the nested objects, while deep copy creates an independent copy of the nested objects. So that is the what is expected when the interviewer asks you the question, what is the difference between shallow copy and deep copy? So you can like create an example and then explain to the interviewer, okay, this is how deep copy works, this is how shallow copy works. And you can then explain to them that the copy of the nested objects is like referenced in the shallow copy. And in case of deep copy, we have the values independent. So this was a simple short tutorial or explainer video on the question. Hope you found this video useful. If you want to watch more such content, then subscribe to the channel, comment and share this video with others. And yeah, that's it from my end for today. Thank you for watching the video and have a nice day ahead. Goodbye.